I'm grateful to be joining you all today for this event. I trust that it will be helpful and provide great insight for you all as you strive to serve the church. I'm grateful for the invitation from Subsplash. They've been amazing technology partners for Ligonier Ministries for many years now. In fact, the Ligonier app launched on their platform in 2010. Can some of you remember just a few years before that, 2007? Remember when Apple launched this thing called iPhone? Perhaps even some of you remember lining up, as I did in 2007, outside of an Apple store to be one of the first ones to hold this new product. It was very expensive, and I don't think the expenses actually changed much. But some of us were seeing a little bit around the corner here about what this device could do, as we really saw this as another way to take the internet with us wherever we happen to be. And so I remember bringing that back into the office at Ligonier Ministries and showing it around. And it was clear in those early days that we saw an opportunity here. Now, this is before the App Store was announced or launched, but we could see that there was a lot of promise here of even just through the mobile web of being able to help people to access the teaching from God's Word that we seek to get out to as many people as possible. Now, Ligonier Ministries began in 1971. So fast forward, we're almost 50 years old as an organization. You can imagine now how many thousands and thousands and thousands of resources we have. We have a lot of audio and video and print resources, and a lot of that was pioneered by our founder, Dr. RC Sproul. Some of you may be familiar with RC Sproul's life and his ministry. He went home to be with the Lord in 2017. And we appreciate so much about RC and the way that he thought about God's Word and trying to bring it to God's people. He was gifted as a Bible expositor, also as a systematic theologian, a philosopher, an apologist defending the faith. But he also had a lot of other competencies. He helped to create an organization that had a manner and methodology for getting God's Word out to people. This is in the early 70s, remember, when things are just getting started. And RC's using the technology of the day. Some people had come alongside of him to start recording. This was novel and very expensive in those days. But RC understood that there was an opportunity to use technology well. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself because really we have to go back to what is the point of Christian discipleship. What is God wanting us to do? And God has given us, through the Great Commission, a command to go to the nations, to teach them all that Jesus has commanded us, to disciple them in the truth of God's Word. And RC, because he's had such a wide-ranging ministry, has been used by the Lord with a particular way of communicating the truth of God's Word. He would be known for taking complex ideas that were jumbled up and then organizing them and helping us to better understand. So taking concepts and then relating them to folks like us who need encouragement and maybe for the cookies to be taken from the top shelf and brought down a little bit lower for us. And that's what RC was able to do so well. I'm sure you can think of other teachers as well who have similar giftings. But this was a manner and a methodology. So it just wasn't what RC taught, it was how he taught it. Perhaps you can even think of the ways that you can use technology to do this same thing. So many times technology gets in the way of what we're trying to accomplish as a ministry. And so I'm grateful that we're thinking through these principles even during this live event. RC's focus was to try and help people to know who God is. Now that's people who are out there on the streets, but it's also the people in the church, because he realized that there was a gap. If we're going to evangelize, really we're trying to help people to know who Jesus Christ is and how God has revealed his will for us and our salvation through Jesus Christ, who is the only way and the only truth and the only life, and no one comes to the Father except through him. So, how are we going to do that? Well, we have to use all kinds of different means to help people know who God is, but also in the church. Ligonier Ministries was really focused on serving the church in those early days with resources. I'm going to put up an image here that some of you may have not actually held in person. You remember these? Cassette tapes? Have you ever seen that picture of an eraser and a cassette tape? And a lot of people don't know the relationship between the two. Some of us do remember those days, and Ligonier was a pioneer. Cassettes were cutting edge technology back in the 70s, and that was one of the ways that the teaching from Ligonier Ministries began to be distributed around the world. It just wasn't efficient to be able to bring people to the Ligonier campus. We had to send it out using the mail and using cassettes and that sort of thing. Well, fast forward with the videos, and around the corner came another piece of technology, VHS. Here's another fun story about innovation and the way that RC and those early days of the Ligonier staff began to think about how to get the word out. So we would record video and we'd put it onto VHS and then call up churches, and churches would inquire about what teaching we had available. We'd let them know about this teaching or that teaching from God's Word that we'd have available on VHS. And they said, well, we don't have a VHS player. Well, what did Ligonier Ministries do? Well, we ended up buying VHS players for some churches, and then we would sell to them the VHS tapes. So this is what RC would refer to the whole Gillette razor concept, where you give away the razor itself, but then sell the razor blades. Well, that was a lot of what Ligonier strove to do in those early years. Well, fast forward a few decades, and along comes the internet. And we all know of the world-shaping impact of this technology that has been used for sometimes ill purposes, but we understand as God's people that we can use these gifts, these insights, these technology tools to be able to send trusted teaching, whether it's next door or it's around the world. And that's really what we're focused on so much. Dr. Sproul wanted Ligonier Ministries to proclaim, teach, and defend God's holiness in all its fullness. And then he put this other appendix to that mission statement, to reach as many people as possible. And that has been our focus now for almost 50 years as a ministry. Well, let's just put that into a little bit of context. We know that there are several billion people now that are online. Yet there are already several billion more people that are not yet online. But with investments that major technology companies are doing, we should see at least another billion people or so come online in just the next 5 or 6 years. Right now, we're thinking through ways that we want to use technology to reach those who are just going to be coming online, just able to access teaching from your ministry and ours. And so the church has always been thinking of innovative ways to use technology. We picked up on the radio as people were really discovering AM radio and FM radio and the way that that could be used to be able to have reliable preaching and teaching from God's Word. And radio still is heard in many parts of the world. But along came the internet, and that enabled Ligonier to now gather people together in communities of learning and discipleship around shared teaching. Think about the ways that the internet is fostering community through innovation of distributing good teaching, solid teaching, trusted teaching to people around the world. And people are picking up our teaching everywhere, whether it's Africa or Asia. They're sitting in coffee shops, they're reading. You can think of ways that an app system is going to be greatly helpful for your own ministry. And that is what Subsplash has enabled Ligonier Ministries to do, to take those thousands of resources and then bring them into a mobile experience. We have decades of teaching that we've now organized. And it's been amazing to sit down with Tim and his team over the years and really dream of new ways that we can take what we have and then put it through the Subsplash app. And they have really listened to us. We've come to them with some bold and visionary requests for features. And it's been remarkable, this kind of thought partnership that we've enjoyed with Subsplash, and we are so grateful. And I hope that you and your ministry are able to make good use of all that they have to offer. Think about the opportunity that is in front of us, where we're trying to reach every age and stage of the human experience, where we're trying to serve people in the church and outside of the church. And this is where we need to think deeply and carefully about how to use technology well. We don't want to be bleeding edge, but I believe that the church can think about technology as a force multiplier. It's just not efficient for us to walk the streets preaching. I think that there's good ministries that do that, and many of us have engaged in that kind of one-on-one evangelism. Yet, we also know that there's an opportunity to use technology to reach even more people, perhaps more effectively and even more efficiently. If we're trying to reach people in our community, they may discover your teaching from God's Word through this app ecosystem that Subsplash helps to foster. We have to think innovatively. And I don't think we need to even create a new playbook here as the church. Think about those early days of the church. Go back with me 2,000 years. Think about what Paul writes to the Galatians, where he talks about Christ coming in the fullness of time. We don't have time to go into all that means. Yet, one of the elements we have to take into view is that Christ came into the world at a time where the Greek language was spoken throughout the Mediterranean among many different nations and many different people groups. God chose the moment when Christ would come into the world, and he used a common language where the truth of who Jesus Christ is, what he has done, could be easily communicated as the disciples fanned out from Jerusalem. Think about using the Roman roads. Okay, so the Roman Empire had developed this massive system of roads that efficiently moved news throughout the empire. What is the gospel but good news? And Paul and the other apostles used the Roman roads to distribute the good news of Jesus Christ. I don't think technology is anything more than just recognizing what God has allowed people to create in his common grace that he's given to us, and then appropriating that wisely so that we can reach many, many more people. May the Lord bless you and give you wisdom and insight as you seek to use technology with innovation, but ultimately for the goal of reaching people for the glory of God. Thank you.